Welcome to Washington Watch with Congressman Walter Jones. Each month, we take a look at the events happening in Washington, D.C. and how they affect our lives here in eastern North Carolina.
Beautiful little horse. It is God's gift to the world. So thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Thank you for...
And now, here's your Congressman, Walter Jones.
Welcome to the July 2014 edition of Washington Watch. Today's guest is Congressman Thomas Massie, who represents the 4th District of Kentucky. Congressman Massie earned both a bachelor's degree and master's degree from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and later founded SensAble Technologies, Inc., based on technology that he invented while in school. Mr. Massie went on to serve as the judge executive for Lewis County, Kentucky, before being elected to Congress in 2012. He and his wife Rhonda have 4 children. I must tell you that I have watched this young man, and he is one of the brightest stars that the Republican Party has in the House of Representatives. Thomas Massie, thank you for being on our show.
Thank you, Walter. I think you're too kind, though.
Well, I'm telling the truth. The people know that about me. They say I'm a man of integrity, and if I see something, I'll tell it the way I see it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas, you have been well known in the brief time that you've been in Congress about your concern about the overreach by our federal government into our private lives. Recently, you had an amendment on the Department of Defense authorization bill that I would like for you to discuss for those people watching this show in eastern North Carolina, because most of those people share your concern and my concern that the federal government is involved too much in our private lives. Would you discuss that amendment for a few minutes?
Well, absolutely, Walter. You know, there's some people in the government that think that you can't keep people safe and follow the Constitution. But I believe that we can follow the Constitution and keep people safe, and people back home know that. The Fourth Amendment in particular is the one bill in our Bill of Rights that's been run roughshod over recently by the NSA as these revelations come out. The program that my amendment seeks to reform is the one where the government harvests all of the data, not the metadata. You know, your listeners may have heard about, well, we're just keeping track of who you called and how long you talked for. Well, there's another program where we collect your photographs, your emails, record your conversations, if we think you're talking with somebody overseas. Now, the problem in the internet world in this day and age is your email could go around the world before it goes back to your neighbor. And the same thing with your phone call. And so what the government's done, they accidentally collect a lot of information on people that have nothing to do with terrorism, people that aren't even talking to people overseas. It could be talking with your neighbor. They've built this huge haystack. Now, they're supposed to go in that haystack and look for a needle that's a terrorist or something that's going to be harmful to our way of life or our government. But what they've been doing, and this has been revealed in recently declassified FISA court opinions, that's secret court opinions, is they've been going in that haystack and looking for information on U.S. persons, specifically U.S. persons that have nothing to do with terrorism. What my amendment does is it says, if you want to go into that haystack and look for information on U.S. persons, you need to have probable cause and you need to get a warrant, just like we've done for the last 200 years.
Well, I want the people watching this show to know that you have been such an advocate for protecting those rights of I go back to Judge Napolitano that wrote a book called A Nation of Sheep, that we would sacrifice our securities to the promise of the federal government to protect us from foreign entities. And this amendment that you had on the floor, you had strong bipartisan support. The amendment passed 293 to 123. This is an issue of civil rights, and it's not an issue of Democrat or Republican. But I want to commend you for you and others who have joined you in trying to ensure that our privacy are protected and we can still fight the war on terror.
Well, and the great thing about that vote total is it's a veto-proof total. If this were a standalone bill and we passed it out of the House with that kind of majority, It doesn't matter that the president, in spite of what he says, you know, he campaigned on more civil liberties and more transparency and you know, privacy for Americans, yet he's not following that. Well, the significance of this vote is, if we had it on a standalone bill instead of an amendment, is that it is veto proof. And a majority of Republicans and Democrats voted for it. It wasn't a lopsided vote in terms of partisanship. There was a second part of this amendment too that I think is important, that people need to know about. We have reason to believe the government has been paying private companies to put backdoors in their products, in their encryption software, for instance. You know, somebody may go on the private market and buy encryption software, or banks might do this to keep their customers' data safe or health records safe. Well, the government would like to have backdoors into that, special keys that lets them unlock the encryption. The problem with that idea is that hackers can also find those backdoors, and it makes us all less safe. And the other thing it does when the government pays companies to put backdoors in their products, it makes them less desirable overseas. This will, you know, if we don't reform that behavior of the government, it's already affecting our economy, and it's affecting the viability of our products in Europe and in Asia. They don't want to buy them. Already in the last year, we've seen the demand go down as they suspect that our products may have defects built into them paid for by our government. The second part of my amendment prevents the government from doing that, from paying those companies to put those backdoors in there. So it makes economic sense. It makes us more secure if those backdoors aren't there.
I appreciate you sharing that second part of that amendment, because I think that's very, very important for the people to know that if there weren't not libertarians like you up here fighting for the rights of those people who are God-fearing, constitutional-fearing, Bible-fearing, and people who believe sincerely that the government should not be so involved in their lives when they've done nothing wrong. And you've articulated that very well, by the way. Thomas, that brings me to another issue that you and I are working on. I voted for your amendment when I said working on, because obviously it was not part of that debate, but I did support your amendment. You and I, along with Steve Lynch, Steve is a Democrat from Massachusetts, have joined together at a news conference attended by the 9/11 families. And you and I have read the 28 pages that are still classified from the 9/11 Commission. And we both know that Bob Graham has been a strong advocate. He's the former senator from Florida who was on the 9/11 Commission and has advocated these 28 pages should be released to the American people. And I know your views, but I want you to share your views with the people watching this show, as I have done myself.
Well, first of all, let me say, if it weren't for Senator Graham and you, Walter, and Representative Lynch, I wouldn't even really know about those 28 pages. And at your insistence, and because I trust you when you say this is something you need to read, I went into the soundproof, you know, secret room here in Congress and read those 28 pages. And it was a really disturbing event for me to read those. I had to stop every 2 or 3 pages and rearrange my perception of history. And it's that fundamental, those 28 pages. I can't believe some of the other members up here, most of the members up here, have not gone to read those 28 pages. It certainly changes your view of the Middle East, I think. Mm-hmm. And again, we're talking about the dynamics in Iraq these days and whether we should be involved, and if we get involved, in what capacity and what could be the outcome. To make that decision, members of Congress need to go read those 28 pages. You know, families deserve to know exactly what happened. We need to declassify those 28 pages. In my reading of those pages, I decided, you know, this was 10 years ago, there's nothing in there that would affect our national security. Right. Some of it may be embarrassing.
Amen.
That is why I believe those 28 pages have been withheld. And if in those 28 pages there is something where we don't want to reveal sources, you could redact a sentence or two here and there. But the American people deserve to know what happened and what led up to 9/11 so that we can prevent the next one.
Thomas, thank you for sharing your thoughts about the 28 pages, because you're exactly right. I don't believe that we can have a strong nation if the people feel like that they have been denied the information that can help us, as you said just a moment ago, prevent the next 9/11. So I'm very pleased that you have joined us. I think that we're going to continue, you, Steve Lynch, and myself, to try to beat the drum for our other members to hear the sound of the drum beat, to read the 28 pages, because I think your point was well made. It does impact on the current situation in Iraq, and I, like you and others, feel very concerned that we might again put ourselves in a situation where that I am not in favor of sending troops to Iraq. I want to know your feelings, but I am not in favor of sending troops to Iraq.
Absolutely not. I don't believe we should put boots on the ground there. In fact, I think before the president does anything, he should return to Congress. This is not the same war that we fought. These are different enemies. This is a civil war. This is a different dynamic. And the president, I hope he will follow the Constitution and come to the only body that can authorize a war or involvement there. And he needs to make the case publicly about what our national interests are, and we need to debate that. All 435 members of Congress should debate that among ourselves before we commit lives over there. The men and women that have so bravely stepped up to defend this country and to follow the leaders that lead them, we owe it to them to have a full debate on this.
Thomas, I appreciate that. I've always said the worst vote I made since I have been in Congress was in 2003, when I gave the authority to President Bush to bypass Congress to make decisions about committing troops to Iraq. And that goes back to your point. We do have a Constitution, and when we abdicate our privilege to serve based on the Constitution to any president, whether it be Democrat or Republican, and it deals with war powers, we are making one of the worst mistakes I think we can make as members of Congress, not to defend our right to debate, as you said, whether we should commit troops or not.
Yeah, every time we let those unilateral decisions, which should be not unilateral decisions, but they should be involving Congress, every time we let them happen and don't speak up, it erodes the power of the legislative branch here and transfers more to the executive.
Well, I know we had the Shift Amendment that would sunset out the AUMF, authorized the military force that we gave to President Bush in 2003. I know you and I and some other Republicans, I think 27 Republicans voted for the Shift Amendment, which he's a Democrat, he's a very intelligent young man like yourself from California. We lost that vote, but that again is what distresses me as a member of Congress, especially when again we're talking about committing young men and women to give their life, and yet we don't even hardly debate it whether they should go or not, and you articulated that extremely well.
Yeah, well, thank you, Walter. And this, this president has promised that he would extract us from these situations, but the reality is, I believe I'm right on these facts. This president has spent twice as much in Afghanistan as the former president has. So we really need a policy there that they need to, as you said, President needs to come back to Congress to reauthorize any engagement, whether it's in Iraq or to continue our engagement in Afghanistan. I know you and I have been talking to this, John Sopko, the Inspector General, who's in charge of making sure that the non-military spending in Afghanistan is not being wasted. And he has told us, look, you all need to pay attention. There's money being spent here. There are buildings being built that we don't need. There are buildings being built, school buildings, that he can't confirm schools being taught there, because we have pulled out of much of Afghanistan, but we're still spending money there on infrastructure. And I think Congress needs to take another look at that. We've spent $80 billion of non-military spending in Afghanistan. We're on the hook, as you well know, for another $20 billion, and we are propping up the government there. And I think a lot of American taxpayers don't realize the extent to which we are spending money there and the extent to which it may not be going to the purposes we even intend it for.
John, that is what Thomas, that John Sopko has been so helpful to all of us. I mean, when I look at the fact that our government is in the process of trying to get the Afghan leadership after this recent election to sign a bilateral strategic agreement so we can stay there for 10 more years to continue to send money to build roads that cannot even be accounted for, still have a military presence, even though it's limited. Kids will still get killed. Young people and old people will still be murdered, and it just does not make any sense. And I can honestly tell you that I will continue to work with you and others to bring some sanity to our foreign policy. And we had 3 Marines tragically killed last weekend who were with the engineering department of the United States Marine Corps building roads in Afghanistan, and all 3 were killed. And I think about all the infrastructure need we have in this country today, how tragic it is from the waste of money and life that we have in Afghanistan. So I concur with you. Thomas, we have about 3 or 4 minutes left in this segment. I'd like to ask you to talk a little bit about the Liberty Caucus, which I'm proud to be a member of, but you are very active with it along with Justin Amash, and let the listeners know in the next couple of minutes the Liberty Caucus that I'm proud to be part of.
Yeah, Walter, you are a great part of that. That's a bright spot in this swamp up here in Washington, D.C. is the Liberty Caucus. I sat down the other day and counted. There are about 36 members who come to the Liberty Caucus. Now, at any one time, we might have 18 at a meeting because everybody's busy up here. But there are 36 members, I think, here in Congress that support liberty fairly consistently on these issues. And it's so important, that meeting that we have on Thursdays where we get together. It's an opportunity for us to discuss these issues instead of taking the talking points from our leadership. We talk about the issues, and there's no grandstanding in those meetings. Everybody is on an equal playing field. And it's been a breath of fresh air for me. I think this would be a lot harder place for me if we didn't have the Liberty Caucus. And Justin Amash is the leader of that. He's done a great job pulling that together. And we talk about privacy issues, we talk about the issues in Iraq, but really I think what brings us all together is the fiscal irresponsibility of Washington, D.C.
Amen.
And we spend most of our time talking about that, whether it's raising the debt limit again or whether it's pulling the wool over the eyes of the American public, but they're waking up to it about baseline budgeting, where in fact they call it a cut and it's not really a cut, and the media lets them get away with it on TV. And just exposing that, I think, has been one of the useful things that the Liberty Caucus has done.
Well, I know Ron Paul. I got involved with the Liberty Caucus before you and even Justin Amash were elected to Congress, and was in the very beginning of the Liberty Caucus with Ron Paul being the leader of our group. And he would be very proud. I know he's very proud because I talked to him a few times during the year, that he feels that the Liberty Caucus with Justin, I'm not going to name everybody,
right.
You are part of that, and the others that you mentioned, are carrying on the torch for the truth and civil liberties in America. Well,
there are a few members here, I like to say, very few that got better with time and with their time in D.C. You are absolutely one of them. And you know, so many of us came in 2010 and 2012, and if there weren't just a very few members like you who carry that torch that says, wait, you know, having all these wars is not fiscally responsible. This is not a conservative position to be in every entanglement in the world. You've sort of carried that torch and have been a consistent voice over the years and helped those of us who got here in 2010 and myself in 2012 sort of pick that up and grow those numbers. And we're making a small difference. As you can see on amendments to DOD appropriations bills like we had passed the other day, those are the small victories we have to celebrate.
Well, Thomas, I want to thank you for being on the show. I hope those of you watching this show are just as impressed as I am with Thomas Massie. a future leader of our party and a future leader in our nation. In just a few seconds, Glenn Downs, my Chief of Staff, is going to be on the show. We're going to talk about some issues that are impacting in Eastern North Carolina. Thomas, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you very much, Walter.